So in this video, I wanted to show you how we've been able to set up an automatic lead generation system for this client of ours that sends over 60,000 emails a month, and also generates, has generated 152 opportunities over the past 4 weeks. This is targeting schools, and they're a recruitment firm. So what we've had to do and the kind of challenges that they had, they were doing things very manually. They were doing using sort of outdated tools and so on. So what we've done is we implemented a lead generation system for them. And then on top of that, we also helped to clean and verify a lot of the data that they had in their CRM that was old, plus also update the data, enrich the data, and find new data. So what this consisted of was using Clay to essentially take a list of schools that they had within their CRM, find the websites of those schools, find the teachers at those schools, and then find the emails of those teachers at those schools, and then add them into this campaign, right? So that's basically what we set up. We also set up subsequences and all sorts of different things so that we could have a nurture sort of strategy on the back end to help convert some of the leads. But a large portion of this was making sure that they've got clean and verified data to be able to send a large amount of volume and to be able to find new contacts as well from within their CRM where they maybe had old data, or just update the data, or like I said, find new contacts. So the way that we did this is in the sheet I'm going to show you. We started with the school names. Now they initially provided a list of schools as well as also their email addresses, and this was all within their CRM. So firstly, they wanted us to just validate the email addresses from those decision makers or the teachers that they basically had in their CRM already. Now that only left us with a certain percentage of those that were valid, which then could be pushed into the campaign. But there was obviously an awful lot of data that wasn't valid, right? So we needed to find new and updated email addresses. And on top of that, there's also a lot of these schools initially in their list had maybe one or two teachers that worked at them that they had contact details for, but a lot of these schools will have 5-10 teachers that will be working at them. So each one of these schools could have multiple more contacts that we could then reach out to, or they could reach out to. So that was one of the tasks. However, we didn't have their websites. We only had school name and address, right? So we then had to figure out how can we get the websites, and how can we find decision makers after we've verified this initial list, right? So what we did was, like I said, we verified the initial list. The first thought that we had was maybe to use a formula to basically pull the website from email, but that didn't necessarily work because a lot of school email addresses are quite weird. Like they have a .sch.uk and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily work, and that's not actually the website of the school itself. They usually have a slightly different like permutation for their email address. So that didn't necessarily work, but that was our first thought. So what we actually did was we used serper.dev to essentially create this. I'm just going to pause it so I can hide our API. Actually, I don't need to show that part. But what we did was we used serper.dev and the HTTP API within Clay, and we essentially put in the school name. And because we had the address, we put in the address. So the reason why we use this is basically what it does is just does a Google search. So instead of using Clay credits, which is 1 credit per Google search, we used serper.dev, which basically allows us to do it for, I think it's like you get 50,000 credits for $50. So it's way cheaper than using credits from Clay. You can do it within Clay, but this is a much cheaper way of doing it. So what we then did so we put in these parameters. So it's essentially just doing a Google search for the school name plus address. So if you were to do that manually and you were to type in, for example, St. George's School plus the address that we have, wherever that is, it might be a little bit later on. Here it is. Yeah, Sun Lane, etc. It will pull up the Google search, and most likely the first result in the Google search, 9 times out of 10, will be their website. So that's what we did. We quite literally would pull the website, and that's how we did it. And then we would normalize. The next thing that we did is once we got all that, we then ran this for all of the rows. We then normalized the domain just to make sure that they all look sort of somewhat similar. And then we just ran a couple of conditional formulas to remove. Sometimes, very rarely, the first result was like Wikipedia or something. So we just removed those. but the majority of them were the actual website. And so what you want to do is before you run the entire thing, because here there's 36,000, so it's a huge data set, you want to make sure that you're running maybe like 50, double check them manually. If they're all good after about 50 to 100, then run it for the rest of them. So that's kind of how we did it. So once we've done that, the next thing that we did was, where are we? Cool. So the next thing that we did, I just lost trail of thought there, but the next thing that we did was we wanted to then find the names of the teachers that worked at these schools, right? So if you were to do this manually, you would go onto the website, right? So for example, I would go over to the website, I would click on here. Bug flew in my eye. Go over to the website, and then I would try and click on the menu, and I don't know, for example, I might do joining, and I would look through and see if I could find who are the teachers that are actually at the school, right, that are teaching at the school. They will 9 times out of 10 will have the teachers on, our admission team, so Lucy and so on and so forth, right? They will usually 9 times out of 10 they will have their list of teachers, at least the head teacher and deputy head and so on the school's website. So then what we did was we prompted Clagent to essentially come in and so we prompted it with visit the school website and then look for names and job titles, staff directories, and then in all here, and then only return like these results basically. And so what we wanted was the full name plus the job title, right? And then we gave it some examples and so on. So then it now pulled a list of the teachers. So we have, for example, here Julie, who is the headmistress, and we have Simon, who is deputy head, and so on and so forth. So we now have a list of the teachers, and it's incredibly, incredibly cheap to be able to do this. So, it's like, this is the cost basically per run, which is insane. If you were to do this manually and to hire people to go in and to find the names of the school teachers for every single one of these for 36,000 rows, the cost would be huge. But with GPT, I think this cost, you'd have to work out, I'd have to work out the maths, but it costs hardly anything, which is crazy. And it's doing all of this work. And again, you always want to run maybe 50 to 100 rows, double check them manually. So go into each website, click on it, click on every page on the website and try and make sure that the teachers' names match. And every single one of them from our manual checks were all correct. So it actually did an incredible job. And this is GPT-4o Mini. So now that we've got the data here, obviously the difficulty is we can't put this or push this into find the email address because we've got lots of different bits of data in one cell. Now there are ways of doing this where you can actually output like a JSON format. But I did it a bit more of a roundabout way, but it was just a workaround. So I just basically split them up with a conditional formula. So I put the teacher's name 1, teacher one job title, and then I pushed it and created a new table and wrote it to another row in a new table. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Then I did teacher 2 job title, teacher 3 name, teacher 3 job title, and so on and so forth. And I did that for 5 of them. Now you could obviously add 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. But 5 is absolutely plenty for us. So what we did after this was for each one, we basically wrote it to another table. So you write to a new table and create a new table, then you map the columns. And so what we did was, we just mapped the columns basically. So the teacher's name goes into full name, and we just make sure that the correct variables or columns are mapped into the new column, into the new table, sorry. And then we just run it, and we run for each one, and we just make sure that each one is going into the first column of the new table. So if we go over to teachers table 1, which is actually here, we have now got the full name of the teacher, which we've set an auto dedupe just to make sure that any new teachers that are coming in, we're not getting the same names twice, so that we're obviously saving with email credits when we actually go and run it afterwards. We've then obviously got the school name, we've got the job title of the teacher, we've got the website, got the location, got the address. Now what we do is we run it through a waterfall to find the email addresses. So we've used Prospeo, then we validate, then we use Lead Magic, then we validate, then we use Find Email, then if we haven't found the email address from these 3, where we're finding the teacher's actual business email, right? So for example, J Rogers at BDB Surrey, at this actual, like their actual professional email address that they would have. If we're not able to find that, then what we do is we run a Zenro scrape, which basically scrapes the website, which will then pull any emails that are found on the website. So this is generic email addresses. This is info at, admissions at, admin at, and so on of the school. So this is a generic email for the school. And then we validate that. What we do as a next step, if we still haven't found it from Zenrose, is Prospeo has I believe it's some kind of permutations thing with emails where it can generate or finds the generic email. So what we do is we just feed it the domain. I believe, we just feed it the domain essentially. And then, so we just give it the domain and it'll basically find the email address from the domain. Now it finds generic email addresses from the domain. So, so you can see like office at and so on, well-being at and so on and so forth, right? So we just pick one of them and we push it into validation. We just push the first result basically from that. So now we've got three steps or three data providers that we're running it through to find their professional email address. If we haven't found their professional email address, we're then scraping Zenrose. And then if we still haven't found their professional email address, we're using Prospeo find email from domain. And then so we're doing 2 steps for a generic email, validating at all steps with Enrichly to basically try and get catch-alls. And then we're putting it into a final valid emails column. Then what we're doing is, because we've got we've got a campaign basically running for them within this table, and because we've got emails that are already valid, we want to make sure that the emails that we're getting here are net new contacts, not emails that we've already generated or already in their CRM. So that's when we run a lookup single row. So we basically just check in the other table, is it there or is it not? And if it is there, if it's not there, then it will go into the file new emails column. And if it is there, it won't be pushed out. Then what's happening after this is we are just normalizing the first name so that in the emails we can, actually say like, hi, first name of the teacher. This was actually a little bit tricky because the teachers have very different names. Some of them are Mr. D and last name. Some of them are first name, last name. Some of them are Mr. Last name, or Mrs. last name, or like J Fisher. So it would be weird if you said hi J Fisher or hi J, just would be strange. So for the ones that we couldn't do it for, we just put hi there. But for example, here, Mona, we just got their first name. But here, for example, Mrs. de Vogt, we can actually use her full name here, because it would be weird if we just put Mrs. de or Mrs. Vogt. I mean, Mrs. Vogt could potentially work, but it's not her actual name. So so you get the point. So we actually used, or like here, Mr. T Body. It would be weird if we reached out to Mr. T Body. So we said, hi, Mr. Body. So anyways, it just normalizes it and makes it look a little bit more human, essentially. And then what we did was we pushed them into campaigns on instantly, essentially. So that's the entire workflow. So just to recap, we're sending about 60,000 emails a month for these guys. We're generating a lot of pipeline for them as well. And what we're doing is we are essentially taking an initial static list of company names or school names in this case, finding their websites using Clay, finding the teachers that work at those schools using Claygent for an extremely low cost, and then finding their email addresses pretty much all automatically. Once the workflow is added and set up, then you just quite literally add data and it will spit out the results on the back end. So I hope that was been interesting. If you've got any questions, feel free to comment below, and feel free to schedule a call with us if you want us doing something like this, or if you've got any data projects that you need a hand with, enriching data, cleaning data, verifying data, and so on and so forth. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.